I'm going to give you a word of caution. Because when you take of the Lord's Supper, it is an absolutely incredible act. It cannot be done ever, not one time. It cannot be done ever out of a sense of ritual or a sense of tradition. If you lose the reason ever, once, why you're doing the Lord's Supper, then stop doing it until it comes back to focus as to why you're doing it. So much so that Paul told the church in Corinth, guys, some of you have become ill. Some of you have become sick because of taking the Lord's Supper in vain, in error. And some of you have died because you've taken of the Lord's Supper in the wrong way. I can tell you, when it comes to time for me to administer the Lord's Supper in churches that I've done in the past, I'll usually preach on it the week prior, and then going up to into it, the entire service is about the Lord's Supper. Because understanding what it means, it is not merely a sacrament of the church. It is not merely a tradition of man. Yes, Jesus said, as often as you do it, remember me. But remember me is an incredibly profound statement, because it means honor me, revere me. It means you build up to it. And I've been in several churches that do it every single week. I've been in churches that do it once a quarter. I've been in churches that don't do it but once a year. Not telling you how often or when. I am saying you better make sure that when you do it, you are giving it its due reverence, respect, ceremony, and celebration. Because that's incredibly important. Now, keep going. Because self-discipline is the last thing that he uses in there. And the word is self-discipline, self-control. But it's translated a behavior that fits the situation. There are times where God says, in the end days, if you're put before judges, if you're put in court, if you go on trial for being a believer, don't worry about what to say, because the Holy Spirit will give you what to say in that moment. When the situation dictates, that's the type of temperament that you need. Why do you know that? I mean, you think of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Self-control is an incredibly undertaught, maybe because it's at the end of the list, but it's undertaught, it's underappreciated. Self-control is huge in the life of a believer. Keep going. Let's read back in, verse 11 again. Back in 1 Samuel. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons. And why did they say Jesse had 8 sons? Jesse's wife had 8 sons. Okay, we're splitting hairs there. Jesse had 8 sons. And in Saul's time, he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. In a family, that would have been one of the lowliest jobs you could do, was tending sheep. Okay, it was important, but it was lowly. All right, so keep going. Verse 18. For 40 days, the Philistine, Goliath, came forward every morning and evening and took a stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. There was Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. So you just heard me say what David's mission was. That was all he had to do. take some food to your brothers, take some cheese to their commanders, find out how things are going, and come on back home. David, you can almost hear it as a parent. Don't get into any trouble. Just go there, give them the food, find out what's going on, come back home. That's simple, right? Something about David. Keep going in verse 20. Now I want you to pay attention to verse 20 here. And the first part of verse 12, verse 20 and verse 21. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Now, hear that, okay? Hear what the Israelite army was doing. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other, okay? And if you've got your outline, you've already kind of maybe taken a sneak peek at what they were doing. Because all they were doing after 40 days was going through the motions. They were just going through the motions. Do you honestly believe there was a single solitary person in the armies of Israel? The thousands, tens of thousands, because he says all of the men of Israel are there. Do you honestly believe there was a person in the army who ran out there shouting that war cry as they were approaching their line and thought, boy, today's the day. We're going to take it home today. No. The Bible's already said they were racked with fear. They were terrified. They ran from Goliath every single time he approached them. Why am I emphasizing this? Because one of the worst things you could possibly do as a church is assemble here on Sunday morning for the sake of going through the motions. If you're just going through the motions, don't expect God to show up. I'm just being real with you. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm not trying to aggravate anybody. But none of y'all's big as Goliath. I might take 2 or 3 of y'all. Just stay away from my right knee, we'll be all right. When a church goes through the motions, you can go out and you can line up for battle and you can shout your battle cry from your tent all the way to the front lines. But if the enemy on the other side knows it's just baloney and it doesn't mean anything, you can come in here and you can make your entire service nothing but singing songs. You make the next service nothing but praying prayers. You can make the next service where you preach for days and days and days and days, non-stop. Go back in the days of Nehemiah where it just went on all day, on and on and on and on and on. But if the enemy doesn't have a reason to be afraid, then you're just going through the motions. See, sometimes we don't like to admit, and I don't like to admit, that sometimes we don't have an enemy out there to see at all. The enemy that we have is our flesh that gets in our way. Our will, our desire, what we think is best, what we decide God wants, because God knows He didn't ask us what we wanted. When we decide what we think is best without consulting God, problems happen. I was talking to somebody just a few days ago, and we were talking about the state of the culture of this world. And everything she was saying was the enemy, the enemy, the enemy, the devil, the devil, the devil, the devil, the devil, the devil. There's no question that the devil is out there and at work. No question whatsoever. But let's be honest, folks. Most of us Christians, most of us churches, we're not a blip on the devil's radar. What reason does the devil have to need to be bothered with us? Because if we can't get out of our own way, then we're doing the job that he doesn't need to do. We're doing it for him. If we can't get out of our own way, if our own flesh fires up enough, don't blame that on the devil. Don't blame that on the devil. And this is a teaching that I've found over the years that not a lot of people know. Just write this one somewhere on your outline or wherever, and you can look at it later. This is James chapter 1, verse 13 through 15. James chapter 1, verse 13 through 15. And I want you to study on this. And I want you to pray on this. The Bible says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one, listen to this, but each one is tempted when? By his own evil desire. He is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't blame the devil for everything going on in your life. Honestly, I don't think we can blame the devil for most things going on in our life. If you are a dot on the devil's radar, you've earned it. Because you are such a threat to his work and his mission that he has leveled down on you. It may feel like it sometimes, but look at all of the possibilities. It's been my experience, when you start right here, you usually don't have to go much further. It's just the reality. It's just the reality. Okay? Keep going. Let's get back to verse 21. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the... Oh, it gets good here just a second. With the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites have been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. There should be a line in there that says, why didn't somebody do something about it then? All of the armies of the living God are standing there in that battle. And nobody with enough backbone to put a stop to it. Keep going. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel. I'm sorry, that's just funny to me. That's just funny. I'm going to give him my daughter, give him great wealth. You don't have to pay taxes. That's such an American thing. I love it. Verse 26. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Do not assume the disgrace that he's talking about is Goliath. It is not. The disgrace is what the armies of Israel have brought upon themselves by not confronting this man of wickedness. Removes this disgrace from Israel. One of my favorite lines in the Old Testament. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Who does this man think he is? And what is the matter with all of y'all? What is wrong with you? What is the matter with you? Verse 27. They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he was glad to see his brother. No. He burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Boy, is he in for a show here just in a second. But notice what happened there. Did you see that little transition? All David did was came down there to bring his brothers some food. Check on them. See how things were going. Report back to Dad. But when he got there, he heard this big pumpkin-headed rascal out there in the middle of the field, yelling, shouting, and screaming. And he said, who does this cat think he is? What's going to happen if somebody kills him? What's going to be the reward for killing this man? And his oldest brother, being a typical older brother, burned with anger when he heard him shooting his mouth off. You know what his brother was thinking? Man, we've been out here for weeks and weeks and weeks listening to this nonsense. Now we got to hear it from your mouth too. We know what our enemy is. We know what our obstacle is. Once you get back out there and take care of them 10 or 12 sheep you got out in the desert, that's the only thing you got to do anyway. Why are you up here doing man's work? Well, there's a little more to it than that. But he calls him there in that last part of verse 28. He says, I know how conceited you are. Conceited can really be confused with confidence sometimes. Was David conceited? It seems unlikely. The Bible says he was a man after God's own heart. Or was David confident because he knew his God? But he takes it even a step further. And he says, I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. How could he possibly know how wicked his heart is? Be careful judging someone else's heart and their intentions. Judge their fruit. Always, always judge a person's fruit. Because it's by their fruit that you'll know them and set them apart. Always judge the fruit. Keep going. Verse 29, he says, now what have I done, David? Said David, now what have I done? Can't I even speak? Man, I can't even say nothing around you. Big brother, everything I say is wrong. You got a little sibling rivalry happening in there just for a split second. Verse 30, he then turned away to someone else. That's funny. He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. Verse 31, what David said was overheard and reported to Saul. And Saul, the king, sent for him. David said to Saul, now he didn't, you find out later, he didn't know him. He didn't know who he was. Okay? Didn't know his dad, didn't know who he was, didn't know his family. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart. Now, I told you last week, David was not a grown man. If he were a grown man, he'd been fighting a battle. David was a child. In fact, Goliath here just in a minute calls him a boy. Okay? So we know David was a child. He was not a grown man. But he was not an easy win either. Okay? And we'll see that in just a minute. David said to Saul, verse 32, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. All of the armies, all of the ranking officials in the military were there. SEAL Team 6 was there. Green Berets were there. All of the special forces. All of the most highly elite and trained were on this battlefield, and they could not find one single man. And this little shepherd boy waddles up after the king calls for him, and he says, "Look, king, don't fret. I will fight him." Right. You know, that's what he had to be thinking, though. Let's be honest. Right. Okay. But let's see what he says. Verse 33, Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy. And he has been a fighting man from his youth. He's been whooping people since before you were born, Junior. And now you want to go out and fight this man?" Keep going. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been watching his father's sheep." Now, this would be the moment, as my children say, where there was a plot twist. But David said to Saul, "Your servant's been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came, carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it." Let me tell you all something. I don't like sheep. Having been an ag teacher for as long as I have and been around a whole lot of sheep, there's not a stupider creature in the barnyard than a sheep.
I think they have like a desire to die.
I've heard sheep breeders say from the time they are born, they're looking for a place to die. It is not in any way, on any level, a compliment from God that we are called sheep. Sheep are mind-numbingly stupid creatures. Sheep will eat all of the grass until there is nothing but dirt, and then they will stand there and eat dirt. They have no defense mechanism whatsoever. There's nothing intimidating about a sheep. Nothing. Nothing. So I say all that to say, in the event that I found myself caring for and owning sheep, if a lion or a bear were to come and take one off, I am not going to chase after the lion nor the bear. We happen to live in a community that has both lions and bears, oh my, and I am not going to chase either one of them down over a sheep. It's just not going to happen. But David, being a far better man than me, went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. That would have been good enough for me. Wasn't good enough for David. When it turned on me, just in case you've forgotten what it is a lion and a bear. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. That's good stuff. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because I am one bad dude. No, it doesn't say that. Because he has defied the armies of the living God. All of the men in Israel standing on that field, all of the men in Israel not bothered enough by the fact that he defied their God day after day, for 40 days, twice a day. It didn't bother them enough to do something about it. David showed up one time, one day, and he is disturbed enough about it that he goes to the king and says, I will go out there and kill this fellow. Just like God killed the lion through my hand, just like God killed the bear through my hand, this uncircumcised Philistine will meet his doom today. Today. Why? Because he has defied the armies of the living God. Verse 37. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. Do you notice what's missing here, folks? In all of this general transfer of dialogue between Saul and David, what's missing?
Fear.
Fear is missing. But there's one thing that we do, and I think sometimes we hide behind it. From the time David got there, the time he went out and killed Goliath, he didn't have to pray about it, not one time. He didn't go say, maybe I should go over here and fast about whether it's God's will for me to take this cattle. Maybe I should go pray and see whether or not it's God's will for me to go do this thing. Sometimes we hide behind that. I need to pray about this. Hear what I'm saying, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand. Sometimes we hide behind that as a delaying tactic, hoping that God will show up for the battle that He sent us to fight. Sometimes we know the enemy is out there, and we know we don't want to confront it. Why? Because there's fear, there's anxiety, there's worry, there's doubt. When what we know we need to do is step up to the line and say to the king, I'll go fight this enemy. God's delivered me before, He'll deliver me again. I'm going to confront this enemy. The end. You see that? Because sometimes knowing God's will doesn't mean you got to pray about it and ask Him. Sometimes knowing God's will is just stepping up and doing it. There are things you don't have to ask God. There are some things you just got to go to and get to work and get dirty or get bloody if you've got to. You've just got to go to work. Keep going. Verse 37, last part, verse 37. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. Verse 38, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over his tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put him in his pouch in his shepherd's bag, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. There's much conjecture and discussion about why there are 5 smooth stones. I've heard people say it was because David didn't have confidence in himself. If you've killed a bear and a lion with your bare hands, I don't think that's the case. Some said, well, he was afraid that, didn't know whether God was going to honor. There's never anything in David's life from tip to tail that says he didn't know what God was capable of. One of the favorite ones is that Goliath had 4 brothers. Goliath absolutely had 4 brothers. It says so in 2 Samuel. He had 4 brothers. One of them is described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes. He wasn't big enough and ugly enough to start with. You had to put 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. 24 digits? Good gracious. And the Bible goes on to say in 2 Samuel that his brothers were in fact killed by David and his armies in a later battle. That's pretty logical. Doesn't say that here, but it's reasonable. Keep going. Verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. There are so few handsome of us. Goliath just hated us, I'm telling you. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Because he brought his staff. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Cursed David by Goliath's gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Au contraire. Verse 45, David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Now, I told you here a while back, several weeks ago, that people make the Trinity harder than it needs to be. It is not complicated. Understanding the Trinity